So I'm just going to say it. Being on the right side of history is terrible. It sucks. Yeah, it's like good in hindsight. In retrospect, it's like when you look back at people who are on the right side of history, it's like, oh, wow, good for them. That was great. And it also, to some extent, it seems obvious. Like, well, of course, those people were on the right side of history because the other side was obviously wrong. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to idealize the 60s so much. I wish I was like so I was so depressed that I wasn't like alive during the 60s because, and to be honest, in a lot of ways the 60s were great as far as pop culture. I would say, I dare to say, one of the best, moments in pop culture or culture history as far as music and so forth. And my favorite show started in the 60s, Dark Shadows, that's my shit. And so I really thought, like, oh my God, like I should have been there. Why wasn't I born in like the 50s or late 40s so that I could like be there of age in the 60s? And I used to love everything about the 60s. Like I would watch any like documentary or anything. And I remember this one time I was watching PBS and I was like so excited because there was this huge documentary about like, I think it was specifically about the Vietnam War, not about the 60s in general, but about the Vietnam War and the response to the Vietnam War. And I was like so excited. Like I think, I did everything but like pop popcorn and like sit in front of the TV like in my PJs. Like I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting the hell into this shit." And my mother said something, it sort of rubbed my mother the wrong way, and I didn't really understand why, but she was like, I think she thought I was treating it lightly. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she sort of snapped at me and said, this was like our lives. This isn't like entertainment. That wasn't fun. That whole situation wasn't fun or amusing to us at the time. I was like, damn, lady, like, what? And I wasn't saying anything like, gee, Vietnam War is awesome. But I think just the way that I got excited about, I don't know. And part of the reason why I was excited about it was because I just loved any footage of the 60s. So I was kind of sitting there waiting to see people in 60s clothes and hear 60s music and just sort of immerse myself in the culture of the time, not trying to immerse myself in the war or anything like that. So maybe she interpreted as like, gee, my daughter really seems to think like the Vietnam War was like fun and entertaining, which obviously I didn't, not then and certainly not now. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, it was, God, that must have been a fucking horrible time. She must have felt so powerless. I mean, because she probably was, I'm sure she knew people. Well, I know she had a brother who went to Vietnam, and I'm sure she had plenty of friends, cousins, relatives, etc., who went there, almost went there, were afraid to go there, etc., because it seemed, at least to me, I could be wrong, but it seemed like a death sentence, really. And it must have been a really hard time. And looking back at, the civil rights movement and stuff, we look back at it now and, they're all heroes. Oh, they're all wonderful. They were all so strong. They were all so great. And they all had this, moral compass that was completely right. And then we look at the other side and we see, you see those videos and pictures of those, basically white people with, crew cuts and Buddy Holly glasses and, little dresses and stuff. The bad people who were deriding them, throwing things at them, the police, attacking them, the attack dogs, the water cannons, etc., all that stuff. And you think, obviously, they were wrong. The thing is, we're surrounded by those people right now. And they're not, just the bad people. I mean, in retrospect and in current spect, they certainly seem bad or wrong to me now, but they're everywhere. They're not on the other side. They're all around us. They're in our, they're on our Twitter feeds. They're on our Instagram. They're on our Facebook feeds. They're, and boy, they do not keep their opinions to themselves. They are very vocal. Being on the right side of history is awful, and it's taxing. It hurts. As of this morning, I haven't really looked at the news much further. I sort of had to for work. But, early this morning, I'm seeing that in Kenosha, where there was protests, etc., there was some person who went around shooting and killing protesters. So not only are the police killing us, but we've got people killing protesters. And there was footage of the police sort of carousing with these, white dudes with huge, massive guns and bulletproof vests and stuff, giving them water and giving them, the thumbs up and stuff. So it's like we just can't win. Yeah, I know we will overcome. We shall overcome eventually. But right now, in the thick of things, it is so hard. We don't have that 30-year buffer yet where everyone regards us as heroes or whatever. Right now, we are the enemy. We are the enemy of polite majority society. It's like Colin Kaepernick. I'm not saying everyone thinks he's a bad guy, but I would say there's this sort of accepted belief amongst most of the majority that either he's downright wrong and disrespectful, or he's at least misguided, or, there's all sorts of, bullshit about, how wrong he is, essentially, because he's infringing upon white privilege. But they have other names for it and other, other descriptors and descriptions and stuff that sort of make it sound like, well, I don't, dispute him necessarily, or I don't hate him as a person, but he's wrong because my privilege is being hurt right now. And in 30 years or so, he's going to be Muhammad Ali. Because Muhammad Ali, at least in my lifetime, was, such a great guy and, so lovable, such a lovable guy and so fun and interesting. And, he also stood up for, against the war and stuff. Isn't that nice? At the time, though, he was not getting the pats on the back or anything like that. And he certainly paid for it professionally. And he paid for it, just in general public opinion. And then it took, 20, 25, 30 years, and then he was lovable and everybody loved him and he was on the right side of history. So I fully anticipate the same thing happening to Colin Kaepernick. But at the moment, it's not so lovable and happy and cushy and whatever. He's not, everyone's favorite black boxer grandpa, He's going through the bullshit right now. At least reputation-wise, if not, financially. So, yeah, he's going to be a hero. I mean, we're all going to be... All of us on the right side of history are going to be... we'll get the pat on the back after a while. But at the moment, we're going to be abused. And I'm not really even doing very much right now. It's just, I don't know. it's hard. It's hard to be it's hard to be right. And I feel like I know everybody says, well, they persecuted Jesus when he was alive, and I hate to pull that up, like we're all Jesus all the time every time someone disagrees with us. But I mean, I think this is a pretty legitimate situation to bring it up in. I mean, he was not getting, Jesus didn't get pats on the back when he was alive. Yeah, by some people, but, they literally killed him. I'm sure he was not feeling very popular when he was alive. And, I don't know. It's just going to keep happening. I don't think anyone's ever going to learn. It seems like we're definitely going in the right direction, but I don't know. It's very taxing, as if being a minority or marginalized in this country or world wasn't hard enough. You're being villainized for saying something about it. You're being othered by people because A, because you're marginalized, and B, because you dared to say something about it. And C, you might not have the most seemingly rational or peaceful response to it that makes other people feel, comfy and happy. Because you're messing with their privilege, really. They don't know how to verbalize it. They might not even know that you're messing with their privilege. They might not know that's why they're upset, but that's what's happening. And that means we're making progress. Whenever I see, especially in my area, I've got some rednecks here, definitely. And the flags seem to be getting bigger and bigger on their pickup trucks. And whenever I see that, there's a part of me that goes, oh my God, these idiots. But there's a part of me that also says they're bothered. They are pressed. And that means we're making progress. If they're uncomfortable enough where they feel their flag is going to protect them, and the bigger their flag, the more they love America, and you love America, and we love America, and those bad people, trying to change America are over there, and we're over here. The more they have that feeling, they have to cling to that feeling of patriotism and nationalism and stuff like that. That I think the bigger their flags, the better we're doing. Shoot, there was something I was going to say and I forgot. I mean, watching The Handmaid's Tale, obviously it's supposed to be sort of an allegory for our times, or any time really, where the badness, the bad people sort of creep in and you sort of let it happen until it goes too far. And then there's the revolt against it. In The Handmaid's Tale, you see so many different levels of rebellion. You see people passing along little notes and stuff. You see people maybe saying a word or two about May Day, the oppositional group network. Or you see people fully, murdering folks and escaping. Like everyone sort of has their own way of resisting. And it makes you think, it makes me think, like, okay, obviously they're holding up a mirror to our current times. What kind of person do I want to be in these times? I mean, obviously you want to be someone who makes a big impact and makes a big, makes a big stink, makes a big, show of defiance. But sometimes you just have to do the little things. The little hints of resistance are important too. And in the mental state I'm in right now, I have to focus on the little things. I have to do the little things. But even those things are hard. It's so hard to speak up in the little ways. Because I really do think that at least saying something vaguely resistant to accepted, narratives that are being put out, because I've got my coworkers, and for the most part, I have to say, a lot of them are very respectful because because of our industry, we do have to talk about these things and keep abreast of situations, protests, etc. And people have been very neutral and, just matter of fact about, okay, there are people here who are protesting doing this. There isn't a lot of editorializing, and I'm very thankful, really. But then there are those idiots who, have to say something, have to add their own little spin to it, and, judge people for reacting the way they are reacting to their oppression. And I want to say something to at least show everybody, you can't say those things. You can't have those questionable, problematic opinions about what's going on without being unchecked. But, obviously you don't want to be causing trouble. You don't, and it's scary. It's scary. I'm sorry. I know it's like, you're supposed to be brave and say shit anyway and, stand up to people anyway, even, the dumb hick you work with or whatever. But, like, there's something very scary about going against the fold and speaking up, and even if it's something small. That shit's hard. Totally, well, I wouldn't say totally unrelated, but in sort of a corollary, there's a corollary of, there's this idea that I've always disliked. Well, it was the 60s, so that's the way things were. Or, it was the 1860s, so that's the way things were. Those were the times. There's this sort of excuse for, bad behavior. Well, it was a long time ago, so that was accepted back then. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse to me. Because in 1860, yes, there was slavery. Also in 1860, there were people who knew that slavery was wrong. So there, even though the majority may have been looking the other way, if not accepting slavery or, whatever, not minding it, there were definitely people who clearly thought it was wrong. If not, not to mention the slaves. There were insurrectionists and abolitionists and stuff. I mean, here in England, etc. So I don't understand this idea of, it was okay back then because it was back then. No, because slavery wouldn't have ended if everybody thought it was okay. Let me say that again. Slavery wouldn't have ended if everybody thought back then that it was okay. So just like now, how people say, well, I'm sure people will look back on us, 30 years from now, and, when they see trans women, especially trans women of color, being murdered all the time, they would say, well, it was the times. It was the teens, how they were back then, so backwards. No, there are people here right now, not to mention the trans people. There are people right now who know that is wrong. And we're saying something about it. Anyone who thinks that we don't know that it's wrong now are living, heads firmly up their ass. We know it's wrong. And there would be no progression if people, didn't know it was wrong. If people didn't know things were wrong, they would never change. If people didn't think things were wrong, they would never go away. So that's what I think about that. Anyway, in conclusion, being on the right side of history is awful. It's painful. It's emotionally taxing. It's physically taxing. It can cost you your life. It can cost you your reputation. It can cost you your livelihood. Being on the wrong side of history, honestly, that's where it's at. If you're looking for comfort, like they say, ignorance is bliss. If you are looking for an easy time, the wrong side of history is a lovely, cushy place to be.